I know you've touched on everything, but if we say, Nataly, just rattle off three quick things that we should tell people to do to get them through coronavirus emotionally and alleviate stress, what would you say?
Okay, the first is practice gratitude daily and be really, really specific in your gratitude. So less, I'm grateful for my family, and more, I'm really grateful my daughter gave me a hug this morning. Second is invest in your self-care. You cannot give what you don't have. If you are overwhelmed, exhausted, snapping at everybody, you cannot get through this in a resilient way, and you cannot help anyone else around you. And the third is be much more intentional about connecting with people in a safe way. So, we're talking about social isolation, and I know some places are opening up, but we're not going to be hugging people for a long time. And that's really hard for us as human beings. So be much more intentional about creating those positive connections with friends, with family in a safe way. So that means a lot more digital. That means a lot more silly GIFs. That means a lot more hi waving on the street, but be much more intentional about that, because feeling connected to others is one of the core human needs, especially right now. I teach happiness and emotional health as a skill. We're all used to thinking that it's a feeling, but it's not a feeling, it's a skill, and it's a skill that we can practice. And it took me 44 years to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I'm not sure I've grown up, but I know what I want to be, and that is I want to teach people these skills. I've been referring to this time we're in as we're in a storm. Like, we are in a really, really tough storm. It's different in every part of the world, but it's hard for everyone. And so since the pandemic broke out 14 weeks ago, or at least here in the US, 14 weeks ago, I have to tell you, I have done 70 sessions, either webinars or with companies, with doctors, with people on the front lines, to help them with resilience and stress and emotional health. So there's a huge need for this. And the reason I bring it up is, one thing I found is we're all struggling with something very similar, regardless of our background or situation. And the main thing that's making this so hard is all the uncertainty. And the thing is, just to geek out for a moment, it turns out that uncertainty is the hardest thing for the human brain to handle. Our human brain would rather know that something really bad is going to happen for sure than to have uncertainty. And we've been in uncertainty for months, and it's not going anywhere. And so what I have been offering to people, what I want to share with all of you here, are just some tips for the way, again, to get through this really, really hard, uncertain storm, because we're in a time of uncertainty, bad or good, for a long time. So the first is one of the ways we make life harder for ourselves, and I'm raising my hand, I do this too, is we create really dramatic stories in our head about what's going to happen. So I've caught myself saying, like, oh my God, what if my daughter doesn't go back to school next year? Or what if we don't travel anywhere for years, right? Like, our brain, the human brain loves stories. We actually feel pleasure when we tell a story. So it's really easy to take this uncertainty and make really dramatic stories in our head. It's also really easy to get stuck in, this is not how it should be. Like, we should not be in a pandemic. I should not be stuck at home, like, etc. And by the way, I'm not saying we should be in a pandemic, but being stuck in the should, or being stuck in the dramatic, horrible story you've made up, the only thing it does is it stresses you out more. And so the first, it's actually a skill that I teach, I call it acceptance, but the first thing I offer you is just, and this is something we all need to do a lot right now, is just to bring yourself back to, what is it that I know to be true, instead of what's the dramatic thing I'm creating. And when you find yourself in the should, just to bring yourself to the could. So this is something I've been doing every day, right? So this is not how it should be. We should not be in a pandemic. Okay, that just stresses me out more. Instead, okay, here's the situation. The situation is we're stuck at home. There's a lot of people getting really sick. We can't go out as much. What is something we could do to, I don't know, feel a little bit better, to connect as a family, right? So you move from should to could. It actually dramatically reduces your stress, because it gives you something you can control within this huge, uncertain, uncontrollable world. So that's my first kind of practice focus. And the second thing I would say, I think now more than ever, we have to fight for joy. I think joy is a verb. Just like I think emotional health is a skill, joy is not a noun, it's a verb. And we have to fight for joy, because it's really hard to find it right now. Things are really tough. Like, people are losing jobs, people are getting sick. And so we really have to fight for joy. How do you fight for joy? The simplest way is every day, can you take a little 10 to 15 minute break and ask yourself, what is something that I can do right now that is joyful or fueling or restful? And do that thing for 15 minutes. It may not seem like a big deal, but it's a huge deal. You know, there's a lot of research that shows when you take 10 to 15 minute breaks throughout the day, when you do something that is joyful and fueling, it actually helps you be less stressed, more resilient. It boosts your mood. It just gives you the energy to keep going through this crazy storm. And so I really, really think it's important. And I think it's so easy when we're going through a hard time to think joy is frivolous, right? Like to put it at the bottom of the list, right? It's the least selfish thing you can do. Taking care of yourself is the least selfish thing you can do, because when you boost your mood, when you feel a little bit better, when you feel a little moment of joy, it gives you the energy to keep going. It gives you the energy to help all the people that you care about. And so that's my other thing. We have to fight for joy.
I'm fascinated by the work that you do. And I was one of these people that for the last, 2 or 3 years of my life, people would ask me all the time, like, how do you do it? You're on a high, you're so happy. And the word happy, I think, is trivialized a bit. However, as we've all heard, it takes 90 days to form a new habit, right? And I feel like so many of us, speaking for myself as well, lived in a constant state of stress for the last 90 plus days. And, for a while, I couldn't even read a positive message because anger would come up. So now things are getting better, thank God. But how do we shift out of that place where it almost feels like it's been ingrained in your brain, or you get triggered by how bad it was and you want to go back there when it's not even that big of a deal?
Yeah, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with your brain for wanting to do that. This is, unfortunately, the human brain has what's called a negativity bias. We're very sensitive to anything that's wrong. Our brain pays a lot of attention to it because it thinks that indicates danger, right? So like, I always say this, like I run a company called Happier, and I'm here to tell you the number one job for your brain is not to make you happy. It's to keep you safe. And so our brain is naturally trained to look for negative things because negative things usually indicate danger, and our brain wants to prevent us. So especially when there are a lot of negative things, the brain becomes really good at paying attention to only those difficult things and to not leave any room for anything positive. So the best way to shift is by practicing the skill of gratitude. And this, to me, gratitude is also a term, when I speak to, these huge audiences, and I ask people, have you heard that practicing gratitude is good for you? It helps your mood, it helps your health. Raise your hand. Everyone raises their hand. Okay, great. And then I say, how many of you practice gratitude daily? And like 5 people raise their hand. And the analogy that I use is gratitude is like broccoli, okay? We all know that broccoli is good for us, right? It has a lot of vitamins and nutrients. Well, guess what? Thinking about how good broccoli is for you does not give you the nutrients. You have to eat the broccoli. Knowing that gratitude is good for you does not give you the benefits. You have to practice it as a skill. And gratitude, and what is gratitude? Gratitude is just simply pausing to appreciate something that is good in your life, even when things are difficult, right? And we all have the power to find something that is good or kind or loving or beautiful or worthwhile in our lives, even during this difficult time. And when we do that, we tell our brain that the challenges are not everything, that there are things that are good, and that literally chemically actually helps our brain to not be in this negative thought spiral. And so I really encourage everyone right now to prioritize gratitude. And one of my favorite ways to create a gratitude habit, you talked about habits, is the best way to create a new habit is to connect it to something you're already doing. So my favorite practice that I teach around gratitude is 3 gratitudes before your first email of the day. We all know first thing in the morning we do this. We all know. We pick this thing up and we're in it. I know we are. We're on email, we're on social media, we're on news. So before you do that, as you pick this up, before you dive in, can you pause and can you think of 3 really specific things that you are grateful for? The smaller the better, by the way. And being specific is really important. So, I ask people like, what are you grateful for? And they say, oh, I'm grateful for my family. That is so general. Like your brain kind of goes, yeah, whatever. What is it about your family that you're grateful for? Why are you grateful for your family? Is it because, my daughter gave me a hug before I got on to do this, or because someone in your family took care of you, or they made you smile? So the more specific you can be, the more powerful that gratitude is for you. And so 3 gratitudes before your first email, before your social media post, before your first news article of the day. And it really helps to create a habit because that's something we all do in the morning.
I know it takes a lot of practice to just worry about yourself and to start with yourself and then affect those around you. But I feel like people around you, especially in the quarantine situation, how about if someone doesn't want to be in a state of gratitude and you allow that to affect you? Like, how can you remain neutral and focus on what you're putting out into the world?
So this is the thing, and you said it in your question. Here's the reality, and this may be really hard for some of us to accept, and I'm saying some of us because I'm part of that. You cannot change anyone else. You cannot. You cannot change other people. The only things you can change change your behaviors, and you can change how you react to what other people do. So many people in all these sessions I've been doing have been asking me, like, my partner is so negative, or my colleague is so negative, or my friend is so negative, it's really affecting me, what can I do? And the first thing they say is, how do I help them? The best way you help them is through your own practices of these skills. Your own practice of gratitude, your own practice of acceptance, your own practice of joy. I can tell you, you might think that, I'm wearing yellow and I'm all smiley, that this came naturally to me. For most of my life, everything I'm talking about was completely foreign to who I was. Ken mentioned at the beginning, I grew up in Russia. I came to the US as a refugee when I was 14. I spoke no English. We lived in public housing, on welfare, on food stamps. It was we spent 3 months in refugee camps on the way here. It was a brutal experience. And also, I don't know how many Russians you've met, but it's not a particularly happy culture. There's a joke about Russians. Russians are good at 3 things: suffering, making others suffer, and complaining about suffering. Okay? And it's only funny if you don't know Russian families, because it's entirely true. And so I had this really difficult experience. I don't come from a particularly happy culture. And so for me, this was a struggle. And I spent 20 years chasing happiness through achievements, which doesn't work. And then I had a breakdown. Ken knows I had a total breakdown. It was a really, really awful, dark time. And the reason I mention that is that's when I learned that my emotional state is entirely up to me. And that's when I started calling happiness a skill. Because regardless of what is going on outside of us, if we intentionally practice things like gratitude, things like acceptance, things like self-care, we do cultivate well-being, even if people around us are negative. And so to me, this is the time to really prioritize your own happiness and well-being. And people say to me, and I used to think oh, isn't that kind of selfish? We're in this world, people are struggling. Well, tell me, when you're exhausted and negative and overwhelmed, are you a good friend? Are you a good colleague? Are you a good family member? I'm not. When I used to, I'm 44, and I spent most of my life before my breakdown as someone who was always overwhelmed, always exhausted. I always put myself last, and I kind of took pride in that. And what I brought to people around me was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of snapping, zero patience, because we are all human beings. We're all connected. So your emotions are contagious. And so think about that. If you ever think that your joy or your happiness are selfish, recognize it's the least selfish thing you can do. Because when you fuel yourself, when you invest in your own emotions and mindset, you become that great friend, that great colleague, that supportive sibling, that supportive parent that can help other people who are struggling get through the storm. And so that's a big answer to your question, but I think it's really, really, really important. Our emotional health and our happiness is not just something that is essential. It is our responsibility, not just to ourselves, but to every single person that we interact with.
I don't look at happiness as being happy. I tell people that I focus on being content, because I have this big smile, and this is literally always thinks I'm happy. And for me, it's not about being happy, because I'm a human being and I am happy and sad all the time. That's just life. But I focus on being content. And by that, what I mean is I focus on being grateful for what I have and happy with what I have, and feeling lucky that even in this time when we're stuck at home and we can't go out, and it is stressful in many ways, which we all know, I'm very content. Look, I'm lucky. And that's where I get my strength and happiness from as we're stuck here during coronavirus.
Well, there's a couple things I just want to reflect on what you said. So the first thing is happiness is really subjective. We all know when we feel it and we all know when we don't, right? And this is why when people ask me to define happiness, I say, you know when you feel good. I really focus on emotional health and well-being because it's inclusive of a lot of other emotions. But a couple of things that I just want to reflect on. The first is, you know, we live, particularly in the United States, but I think in many places in the world, we're in this culture of like, happiness is about smiling and being positive all the time. And I actually think it's quite the opposite. Emotional health does not mean you feel good all the time. It doesn't mean you're positive all the time. It means that you know how to embrace all of the different emotions that you feel with compassion. Because we are human beings. We feel a variety of emotions. We are not meant to always feel good. I know it may sound defeatist, but we are meant to have sadness and joy, fear and courage. We're meant to have a variety of emotions. And in fact, research shows that people who experience the greatest variety of emotions through their lifetime are the happiest. They're the most satisfied with their life. And so I think it's important to not think of happiness as being positive all the time, but to recognize that true well-being comes when you can embrace all the different emotions that you feel as a human being. You know, one of the ways I'm thinking about it, actually an insight I had recently is, like, emotions are not like going to the grocery store and picking out your favorite ingredients. Like, we don't do that. We feel all kinds of emotions, and often we feel emotions that we can't explain. Like, think of a really happy movie you've seen and you feel really sad, or something sad is happening and you feel joy, right? We're complicated beings. So to me, emotions is not something you go pick at a grocery store. It's more like, you know, those cooking shows like Chopped, where you get a basket of ingredients, right? Every day we get a basket of emotions, some pleasant, some difficult. And what our practices and what our practice of, this is why I talk about emotional health as a skill. The skill is, how can you embrace all of those emotions and create the best possible inner experience for yourself, right? And we can't do it by just saying, oh, these are the ones I don't want. They're there. And so I think that's a really important insight that I think is, I'm grateful I get to share based on what you said, is that happiness is not about feeling positive all the time. It's really learning how to embrace yourself fully as a human being. And the other thing, you know, around feeling content, and you talked about gratitude. That's why I think gratitude is so essential, is in a storm, in a challenging time, it is really easy to lose track of what is good because our brain wants to look for what's negative. It's just how we are. There's a lot of input, right? Just open the news, right? Everything is going wrong, especially right now when the challenges are real. It's a real thing. And so gratitude, consistently practicing gratitude, is rooting us. To me, I call some of these practices my daily anchors. Like, it anchors you, it centers you in that sense of, yes, things are hard, but there are things that are good. And you know, one of the ways I think about it is there are always going to be challenges in life, always, right? Right now they're huge, but there are always challenges. So challenge is constant, but struggle is optional, because struggle is our inner experience. Struggle is how do we react to the challenges, and gratitude is one of the things that helps us to struggle less.
So Nataly's book is Happier Now, and we'll put a link here, there, somewhere. So if you want a copy, you will get it. Hey, wait, I'm on one of those pages, right? What page am I on? I'm on one of those. I'm in
You
the
are
book.
on one of the pages. Ken is
I gotta go see.
book.
Yeah. And the second thing is we're having you back live.
We're gonna do
July
a live
22nd.
event. Yes, so you can all ask questions, your own questions. Yeah.
Wait,
July 22nd.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What?
Are you and I doing a challenge? Is she going to give us a challenge to do for the live event?
Oh, do you want to? I think we talked about that, right?
Well, why don't we practice gratitude every
Why
day?
don't you guys do a gratitude challenge every single day from now until, and you have to check in with each other every day.
You know what, Ken? I had this vision of doing it on Post-it notes. Just
Love it. And then when we do the live event, we'll report to you how it went, and we'll talk about that.
That's great. And also when we do a live event, we can do a giveaway of our 21-day happier challenge. Like, we can give a bunch of them out for free. They're like $100 and it's a great 21-day challenge. So we can figure that out. But I think that'd be a great way to launch.
Cool. All right. So July 22nd, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Startup Cuba Facebook page. If you're not on the Startup Cuba Facebook page watching this, that's where it will be, Facebook Live. And Nataly, thank you very much. Mwah. We appreciate it. And
July 22nd, you guys rock. Everyone take a deep breath this weekend. That's my homework. Everyone, we need to, that's the other thing. There you go. Zuzy did it.